The Cincinnati Bengals knew exactly where things went wrong, and now, the biggest question surrounding the team isn't about the offense, the quarterback, or the star players. The real issue is whether the organization has actually solved the problem that repeatedly cost the team victories. After months of roster changes, new signings, off-season workouts, and countless evaluations, it all comes down to one simple question. Have the Bengals truly fixed their defense, or are they heading into another season with the same old problems, just in different uniforms? Before we dive into the details, don't forget to like the video and drop a comment. Go Bengals! Now, let's get to what really matters. There wasn't much debate about what the Bengals had to improve after last season. Everyone inside and outside the organization understood where the biggest weakness was. The defense simply wasn't good enough. It wasn't just one statistic or one bad stretch of games. The problems appeared almost everywhere. They struggled, giving up points. They surrendered yards through the air and on the ground. Missed tackles became a weekly frustration. No matter which defensive category someone wanted to look at, Cincinnati consistently found itself near the bottom of the league. The front office recognized it. The coaching staff recognized it. The fans certainly recognized it. That realization became the foundation for everything that happened during the offseason. Instead of making only a couple of minor adjustments, the Bengals attacked the defensive side of the roster from multiple directions. They used free agency. They made trades. They invested draft picks. They even continued adding competition through undrafted free agents. Rather than hoping internal development alone would solve the problem, they chose to bring in entirely new talent at multiple positions. Among the names added were Boy Mafe, Brian Cook, Jonathan Allen, Kyle Duggar, C.J. Mosley, Dexter Lawrence, Cassius Howell, Takario Davis, and Landon Robinson. Every addition represented another attempt to improve the overall level of talent on the defensive side of the football. The philosophy appeared straightforward. If the previous group wasn't producing consistently enough, then replacing portions of that group with new players offered the fastest path toward improvement. But the Bengals weren't simply looking for better athletes. They also appeared to place real value on experience. One of the more interesting points throughout the offseason centered around the type of players Cincinnati targeted. Rather than adding only young developmental prospects, they brought in players who had experienced winning at the highest level. Championship experience became part of the equation. According to the discussion surrounding the roster, the Bengals no longer had defensive players remaining from their own Super Bowl run, especially after Trey Hendrickson's departure. That made adding players with recent championship experience even more notable. Boy Mafe arrives after recently being part of a Super Bowl winning run, while Brian Cook joins Cincinnati after winning multiple championships with Kansas City. Those aren't just additions based on physical talent. They're players who have participated in pressure-filled games, understand championship expectations, and have experienced what successful organizations demand every day. Duke Tobin emphasized exactly that philosophy. He explained that these players fit both the coaching staff's vision and the physical style Cincinnati wants to play. He also highlighted that both players are still relatively young and may not have reached their full potential yet. Their previous success and championship backgrounds were viewed as valuable qualities beyond their athletic ability alone. That combination of talent and experience could become one of the more important storylines once the regular season begins. Of course, not every addition generated identical reactions. Boy Mafe, for example, sparked debate. Some questioned whether the Bengals paid too much or placed too much optimism on his arrival, but the reasoning behind the move seemed fairly clear. Cincinnati needed another pass rusher following Trey Hendrickson's departure. Mafe may not immediately replace elite production, but he brings consistent pressure and rotational value along the defensive front while also carrying championship experience into the locker room. Brian Cook represents another interesting move. There had been significant discussion leading into free agency, and once negotiations progressed, Cincinnati ultimately secured the safety. His arrival isn't viewed simply as adding another defensive back. It's also viewed as directly addressing one of last season's biggest weaknesses: tackling. Few issues frustrated Bengals fans more than watching defenders repeatedly miss opportunities to bring offensive players down. Statistics only reinforced what everyone watching games had already seen. According to Pro Football Focus, Cincinnati finished the 2025 season with 163 missed tackles, leading the league in that category. Whether fans preferred analytics or simply trusted their own eyes, the conclusion remained the same. Too many drives continued because the Bengals failed to finish tackles consistently. Safety became one of the first positions where the Bengals attempted to correct that problem. Geno Stone left the lineup. Brian Cook arrived. The comparison between the two immediately stood out. Stone finished the previous season with 23 missed tackles, while Cook recorded only 5. If Cook can maintain similar tackling efficiency in Cincinnati, that's an immediate statistical improvement at one position before considering any other changes across the defense. However, replacing one player doesn't eliminate every concern. Several defenders who struggled with missed tackles remain on the roster. Barrett Carter was credited with 18 missed tackles. Jordan Battle finished with 17. Demetrius Knight recorded 16. Unlike the safety position, those players weren't replaced. Instead, the expectation is that another year of experience, coaching, and improved support around them could naturally lead to better results. That idea received additional support through analysis discussed from ESPN's Bill Barnwell. Rather than focusing exclusively on individual tackling ability, Barnwell argued that improvements along the defensive line could make life significantly easier for linebackers and defensive backs. If offensive players are reaching the second and third levels untouched, defenders behind the line face much more difficult tackling situations. A stronger defensive front changes those situations entirely. Barnwell noted that, according to Pro Football Reference, Bengals defenders missed 170 tackles last season, which was 39 more than any other team in football. He also pointed out that Cincinnati ranked last in yards allowed before contact on running plays. In other words, opposing runners frequently reached linebackers and safeties with momentum already built up, making open-field tackles far more difficult. That's where additions like Dexter Lawrence become especially important. Even if Lawrence isn't personally making every tackle, occupying blockers and disrupting plays earlier allows linebackers and safeties to attack runners under much more favorable circumstances. The same thinking extends toward future development from players like Shamar Stewart and continued contributions from Boy Mafe. Improvement may not come from one player suddenly becoming a perfect tackler. Instead, it could come because the entire defensive structure functions more effectively from the line of scrimmage outward. That's probably one of the strongest arguments supporting optimism surrounding this defense. Every addition doesn't have to become an all-pro. Every newcomer doesn't need career-best production. If each move slightly improves one weakness while helping teammates perform better, the cumulative effect could become substantial over an entire season. Still, not everyone believes Cincinnati solved its problems. Even after free agency and the draft concluded, Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport projected the Bengals' defense to finish only 28th in the league during the 2026 season. His reasoning centered on uncertainty. The defensive line, despite all the new additions, remains unproven together. If that group fails to perform significantly better, then the existing questions surrounding the linebacker unit and secondary could once again become major issues. Since the secondary allowed the 7th most passing yards per game the previous year, Davenport argued those weaknesses could easily be exposed again if the defensive front doesn't dramatically improve. That's essentially the nightmare scenario. Imagine adding multiple players through free agency, trades, and the draft, only to finish with almost exactly the same defensive ranking. That would mean the off-season investments produced very little meaningful change. It's certainly possible. No off-season acquisition guarantees success before games are actually played. But there's another perspective that deserves equal attention. The Bengals didn't simply add names. They specifically targeted areas that had obvious weaknesses. They brought in additional defensive line talent. They upgraded safety. They introduced players with championship experience. They attempted to reduce missed tackles. They invested heavily across multiple levels of the defense rather than relying on one blockbuster acquisition to fix everything. There is also growing confidence inside the team itself. Players have expressed belief in the group's potential, and there's a noticeable sense of optimism surrounding what this roster could become. While confidence alone never wins games, belief inside the locker room often becomes an important ingredient when teams attempt to take significant steps forward. That doesn't necessarily mean the Bengals suddenly possess a top 10 defense. No one can honestly promise that today. But judging solely from everything the organization has done throughout the offseason, it's difficult to argue they ignored the problem. They clearly identified their biggest weakness. They aggressively addressed it through multiple avenues. They added new talent. They added championship experience. They attempted to improve tackling. They strengthened the defensive front. Now comes the part no off-season can answer. Can all of those pieces actually come together once the regular season begins? That's the question every Bengals fan will be watching. Because if the defense takes even a significant step toward league average while maintaining improvements in tackling and overall consistency, Cincinnati's entire outlook changes. If those improvements don't materialize, then many of the same conversations from last season could quickly return. The off-season is complete. The roster has changed. The expectations have changed. Now, it's time to find out whether the Bengals truly fix the defense, or whether the biggest concern from last season is still waiting to surface once football returns. What do you think, Who Dey Nation? Did the Bengals do enough this offseason to finally turn the defense around, or do you still believe there are major concerns that haven't been solved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who Dey?